Greetings and welcome back to another edition of MGTOW Talk. I'm here with a gentleman you might know. His name is Alexander MGTOW, or Alexander MGTOW, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And I've had a couple of conversations with him privately, and he's a man of immense knowledge on a wide range of topics, ranging from politics, history, development of countries, etc. However, I'd like to talk to him at some point in time publicly about some of those things. Today, we're going to focus on feminism in Germany and the situation of men in terms of marriage and divorce in Germany, because it is different from the Anglo-Saxon countries, and hopefully we're going to learn why and wherefore and how that all came to pass. So let me first welcome Alexander here. Thank you for being here with me.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, so we've talked about this a bit privately, but feminism seems to have taken on a different dimension in Germany when compared to some place like the United States or Canada. At least for the, pardon me, at least for someone standing outside looking in, that's definitely the impression. So where do you think this impression comes from?
Well, I think the problem is that feminism in its most radical form, in its very, let's say, obnoxious and loud form, is something we have seen especially in the United States. Because I think the United States of America is a very more polarized society than most European societies. Both, even the big parties, very often they tend to have very unreasonable and quite off the mark opinions about certain topics, and tend to be more extreme in a way, at least in when it comes to rhetoric, than in most continental European countries, I'd say. And this is why feminism as a political force is important even in Germany. It is, don't underestimate its political influence in that sense, but it's even in its demands and even if its ability to compromise, less um, less merciless, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, yeah. But well, I mean, one of the things that strikes me, looking at the way, say, the American university or Canadian university system has become,
Yeah,
with entire websites with guidelines about rape culture, how not to rape. So I've yet to see anything similar of that proportion in the
yeah,
context of, say, German universities. So the most extreme forms of this sort of thing, I think, have yet to arrive in Germany. However, some
yeah.
people have said maybe it's just a matter of time. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that generally in America, as I said, things are way more polarized. And in Germany, we don't see that. If you would basically make a campaign in Germany about, men are all potential rapists, and, we have to teach boys in university not to rape women all the time, and this simply doesn't correlate somehow with reality, people would be upset about it, and they would be upset regardless whether they vote for the Conservative Party or the Social Democrats or the Green Party or whatever. You would get a lot of people shaking their heads, and people sending letters or complaints and saying, "What the hell is this?"
Mhm.
While in America, basically, you have the impression that very often it's about partisan politics, and whatever stupid the let's say the Democrats do, or organizations that are heavily associated with the Democrats, even in theory, you support them no matter what. You see,
Yeah,
well, here
it's
basically the
interesting.
political discourse is different.
It's
Yes.
interesting that you mentioned that. You're almost suggesting the possibility that, on the whole, Germans are more reasonable and more rational about at least some things than Americans. And I might actually
Yeah.
subscribe to that. I'm not sure, but what do you think about that?
Well, I don't think it's because the German have a more reasonable genetics than, let's say, the
No, I
Americans,
wasn't
because
suggesting that
the German,
necessarily.
no, 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 I wasn't suggesting that you did, but the thing is the Germans have done quite unreasonable things, and they were quite extreme in the past. So I think for America the difference is Germany is very coherent from the north to the south. There are little differences, relatively little differences. even the antagonism between large cities and rural areas isn't really, particularly intense. But if you look at America, basically, America is basically a country where you have places where you have the first world. You have like Palo Alto and New York, and then you have places like Camden, where basically the average income is that of people living in Eastern Europe. So you have like places where you have the first world and almost third world in one country. And the differences between, let's say, the Midwest and the rural Midwest and the coastal regions, the cultural and economic differences are very huge. It's just a more, and this is why the American society appears to be, I think, more torn than our compact European countries.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose part of that has to do with just the geographical size of the landmass itself. But absolutely, there are people living essentially in third world conditions in the United States, and alternatively, people who are, the wealthiest people in the world. It's a bit,
Yeah.
it's a bit strange. Um, but so I guess you're proposing that if someone were to come to Germany and say, men are rapists, teach men not to rape, that this would be rejected because Germans these days are sort of skeptical of put it, I guess, extreme ideas.
Put it this way: in Germany, more people think alike
Hmm.
because
Right.
because
Yeah. Well.
the differences in our living conditions even are not that huge.
Yeah.
And as a result, somebody coming, let's say, from the outside, if now an American comes and brings his, it doesn't matter if it's, extreme left-wing feminism or right-wing Bible thumping, people will just be irritated and say, this is out of touch with what we see and experience every day. I give you a
Right.
very good example. There was a situation that a couple, I think 1 or 2 years ago, there was a conservative um, um, uh, journalist, and he wrote an article basically against fathers, that fathers shouldn't have equal parenting rights when the children are small. And what happened is that many men, especially concerned fathers, and even women for that matter, they wrote complaint letters to the German Press Council, and the German Press Council condemned the journalist
Yeah.
for discriminating men and fathers. So I wonder if in America we would see the same reaction.
Oh, almost certainly not. And another interesting thing I've noticed just in my sort of day to day observations, the kinds of it sounds so weird. The way fathers interact with their children, particularly their daughters, in
Mm,
Germany, I don't think you would see that in the United States because I think in the United States they would be incorrectly perceived as pedophiles. There seems, I mean,
mm,
in Germany, nobody thinks it's weird, to for a father to show affection to his daughter, for example. Whereas,
yeah.
that's there's a kind of perception I think in particularly in Anglo-Saxon countries, especially in places like Canada and the United States, that that's kind of weird. Uh,
Okay.
there definitely is something different in Germany culturally, I suppose, compared to the United States, and yeah, it probably has something to do with the fractiousness of the country and the size and all these other factors
Mm,
that you mentioned, which I suppose is a good thing because you certainly don't want to go to university where, part of the course program is, learn on how to rape and what have you. I don't know what the program is in the United States, but
I wonder, are there schools in America where you learn how to rape them?
yeah, yeah. No, I was
No,
a bit shocked. I looked at my alma mater a couple of months ago, and I just was just looking up, if any of the faculty was still there. That when I went to, there it was there, and it was incredible. They had 9 or 10 pages about the rape culture and all this stuff, and I just think, wow, this has just infested everything, hasn't it?
mm. No, it's something you would rather not have here. I mean, we have individual professors, sociology professors or politology professors, and they they talk about gender studies. But even when I studied history and philosophy, we had maybe in the whole semester, maybe one, you know, optional course about gender, you know, basically for the whole not even just for the faculty of humanities, but for all of the University of Frankfurt, which has, I think, 50 back then, 40, 50,000 students. Okay, there was maybe one course with maximum 30 places about gender studies, and I think like 5 or 6 people actually, took that course.
Yeah.
There's also not this interest. People are not easily mobilized. The whole discourse about men and women here is a bit more different than in America. In America, there's a lot of discourse about entitlement,
Mm.
which in continental Europe is now strongly fading.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
seems as well that that in Germany, as you're mentioning now, everything is just a bit less polarized. One, two, people I suppose are a little bit more skeptical. Three, they also seem to just, I mean, essentially anything that sort of breaks the Deutsche Ordnung, I guess,
Yeah.
the that the sort of day to day order of
Routine.
society is frowned upon. But I wonder if that also has something to do with the relatively poor reception of, say, MGTOW concepts and just the idea of MGTOW in the context of Germany. Now, every now and then I'll talk to somebody who is in Germany, who is knows MGTOW or is familiar with my videos or Barbarossa's or whatever, but it doesn't really seem to be a common thing. And I can, as a sort of anecdotal evidence, years ago when I was still working my manual labor job in the warehouse, a colleague of mine, not the brightest guy, but he was telling me the story of he saw some television program in the United States where the men were saying they were afraid, I think it was in New York, to go into a taxi cab with a woman because they might be
Hmm.
accused of false rape
Yes.
or an elevator or something along those lines.
Yes.
And he just that couldn't didn't register with him, and we talked about it with some other colleagues for a bit, and nobody really understood that. So the idea of sort of being afraid to be in an enclosed area with a woman because she might accuse
Mm.
you of something doesn't seem to be a very common thing in Germany.
Yes, because the whole legal practice is different. You see I mean, that doesn't mean that there are not mistakes. It doesn't mean that there is not a general bias if a woman accuses a man. Um, but I would say generally also law enforcement works a bit more professional in that case. For instance, there was an article last year, end of last year, in a local German newspaper, and they were interviewing a woman, a female police officer, who was working in the department to combat sexual crimes. And that woman said that up to 80%, in her experience, of all accusations are wrong, and that wrong accusations in the field of sexual harassment and rape are a huge problem. Okay, so people are there's less political correctness when it comes to men and women in general. It's the discourse in Germany is allowed to be a bit more freely, you see, and extreme positions, let's say extreme pro-woman positions or extreme conservative positions, are usually not falling on fertile ground so easily.
Mm. Well, that said, I've seen a couple of discussions led by, I believe the term is the head of the Ministry of Families, this
Mm.
woman. She didn't strike me as a terribly reasonable person. Maybe
The
as
current one, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, she isn't.
I
It's
mean, so this does exist in pockets in Germany. It's just better contained. I suppose that's a good thing. It means that some of the most extreme insanity you see in places like Canada, the United States, and Australia as well,
yes.
UK, basically the Anglo-Saxon countries, and we can get to that in a bit. I mean, maybe we should talk about that now. I've
Mm.
puzzled over this for years. Why
Yes.
almost universally, it's as much as they're all the perhaps it's sort of a cultural link because all those countries are English speaking countries, but
Mhm.
places like Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, the United States, all of these countries have this really horrible, very extreme form of feminism. Now, I don't think any feminism is good, but it it's just so odd that it was able to set up shop there and be such a strong force, and really take on these very strange and just immensely strong forms that we see now. Whereas you don't see that on continental Europe. I mean, not to the same degree.
No.
And maybe it's just a general thing in continental Europe that people are just sort of more bodenständig, for, sort of their feet
Down
are on
to
the
earth.
ground, and
Yeah.
they're just sort of they don't pay attention to this extreme craziness. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yes, I think that there are cultural and historical reasons why the Anglosphere is a bit more extreme when it comes to men and women, and the European continent less so. And partly it has to do with, let's say, the religious culture, especially in places like America, where you have lots of very conservative Protestant sects, and there you have more traditionalism, at least in the rhetorics, in the culture, still alive, at least in the heads, maybe not anymore in reality, but people in the ideology that people have. And traditionalism, in my opinion, is the actual fertile ground on which feminism can thrive. Yeah? Because feminism, in its political form, and especially in its most toxic forms, is all about special rights, entitlements for women, special rights, special treatment. And traditionalism has different roles for women and different roles for men, ideally. And this is why they have, interestingly, less of a problem to give women special exemptions because they are women
Mm.
than, let's say, on the continent, where it could have been because we had two world wars here where women had to work in factories to support the war effort in all countries. Um, it could be that, especially after the war, because of the shortage in labor, women had to work more. And generally, the perception on the continent is that if women want something, they should get a job. You see,
Right.
if you say that in Germany, it's not particularly offensive. People would say, yes, of course. If you say that to an average American or Canadian, they would be shocked. Like, what women have to work for stuff they want.
Yeah, and I noticed that. I mean, years ago when I didn't realize, this was maybe 5, 6, 7 years at the beginning when I was sort of fully becoming red pilled, if you will. I was
Mm.
talking to some work colleagues about this, and I so I recommended to one of them the der dressierter Mann. What is it? What's it called in
Yeah,
English
yeah.
again?
The domesticated male. Yes,
Yeah, no, that's not the English title, but in any event, the author.
yes.
It's still early here. I just got up recently, so the author is Esta Vila. So I said,
The manipulated man.
Manipulate, ja, der
Yeah,
Siegermann,
yeah.
genau. So that book I thought was really good at the time, so I recommended it to him, and he read it and he thought, "What is she talking about? German women work; they're not, complaining, trying to get free stuff." I mean, it just
Mm.
was a kind of a strange experience for him because he couldn't relate to it at all.
Yeah.
Whereas that book, ironically, written by Argentinian German, but
Mm.
uh, a German woman decades ago, seems to resonate
Yes,
far more with Americans and Canadians in the
yes,
21st century than it did in the 70s
yes,
with Germans back then or even now.
yes. Because, as I said, the perception on the continent is that um, no, nobody really tries to actively discriminate women, from having a career or discriminating them, despite when they deliver good results. But the general consensus is, even among women, a woman wants something, then she has to get off the couch and do something.
Yeah.
Okay. Well. In the Anglosphere, it's lots about entitlement, and yes, women are so different. It's very funny because they talk about equality, but then, for women everything is different, and women are different, and this is why the whole world has to gravitate and to accommodate to them. So it's always about, we have to roll out the red carpet and then carry women over the red carpet to reach what they want. While in Europe, the idea is women want something, well, you know, don't ask me, do it. Uh, and
Yeah.
on the other side, there's less talk about that. Let's say people feel uncomfortable when they have a female boss or something like that.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
that
Yeah, and I've noticed this perpetually with Germans I talk to. They just it's not an experience they can relate to or observe, and I think it's no coincidence that MGTOW as a concept is most sorry, it's still early for me, popular in places such as the United States, essentially the Anglosphere, as you put it. So that's very interesting. It's interesting that it just it'll probably never come to that point in continental Europe the way it has done in the United States and other places that speak English.
Yes, I don't think so.
Right.
You will never get to this extreme. It will rather fizzle out because anyway now in most European countries the life men and women live are very similar. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I even had a female colleague back in the day when I was working in the warehouse, and she was fine.
for
And
instance,
we're on decent terms. Wasn't
yeah,
no issues there really.
yeah,
Um, Works pretty hard. I've
yes,
never seen the kind of entitlement mentality in
yes.
Germany or in other European countries for that matter to the same degree. So
It's something that basically also doesn't jive with, especially in Germany, with the German culture of being industrious and working.
yeah,
So that a woman has to be productive. So maybe it's an excuse when you're a housewife and you have like 10 kids, then you can't really work. Okay, people understand that. But anything like below this extreme basically is not an excuse not to go to work. People have to work. The German work ethic also plays into that. So there was never the issue that a woman either is a perfect housewife and has many children, or she has to get up at 6 o'clock and make it to the shift, to the beginning of the shift at the factory. That's somehow the mindset that especially carried on after the war.
yeah, yeah. I suppose you could say this is a legacy of Prussia as much as anything else. I mean,
Yes, it is. It is also a legacy of the relatively strong industrialization parts of the Western European continent, especially have been going through. Um, and because you have to understand that for women to be housewives and not to work, that was something that was exclusively, belonging to upper middle class people, upper middle class families who could actually afford that the woman doesn't pull in income. So women in Europe, in Western Europe, especially in the industrialized nations such as Germany and France and Benelux, um, the majority of women has to a degree always been working,
yeah.
at least in one form or another, but on the labor market. Uh, and this is why the mindset is that this is normal, you see,
Okay,
and a
so
woman.
yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, it certainly corresponds to all my observations, having lived in Germany and Austria and basically these
Mm,
countries off and on for a while. Um, so So we have that situation, and I guess if an American or a Canadian were to hear that, he'd then say, "Well, so why aren't you going out and dating German women? They sound so much better, et cetera, et cetera." I mean, no, I mean, I suppose it's a legitimate question. They work hard. They don't want
yes,
entitlements. I don't want the audience. Not I don't think the audience would get that impression. The ones who've been here a long
yes,
time that German
yes,
women, for example, are somehow a different creature entirely. That they're
no,
they're not like the other women. So I mean, we don't want to drift in this idea that because German women or the culture rather is less entitled, this
yes.
somehow translates into a kind of Nawalt argument, right?
No, certainly not, and I think the problem is it has very little to do actually with whether women work or not. It doesn't change the very nature of the relationship between men and women. I think
Yeah.
that is the biggest problem. Or I would rather say it depends what kind of expectation relationship you want. If you want to get married in Germany, you will still regret it most of the time,
Yeah.
as you would still regret it in England, Australia, France, Spain, and wherever else. You see, if you are just want to have a, let's say, not too attached girlfriend, probably it's less. It could even be less. I wouldn't even say it's less complicated than in other countries. Actually, it's not. You see, but the idea, certainly it doesn't translate into that German women are like something different than other women. It always depends what kind of relationship do you expect. The more you go for like traditional setup with marriage and all that, the more as a man you will be very frustrated later on.
Yeah. Well, then I think also, in my observation, it's fairly common for not marriages, but sort of just long-term partnerships. It seems to be much more
Mm.
common in Germany than in the United States, rather than, I
Yes,
mean, you see people still getting married, but official
yes,
marriage seems to be less of a thing. These huge,
yes,
blowout weddings that you have in the United
yes,
States that cost tens of thousands of dollars. People are
yes.
just seem a lot more quiet about what they do.
Yes.
Nobody, and the other thing is that people, the few times I'll talk to people, nobody gives me shit about my essentially disinterest in relationships. I don't participate. Nobody
Mm.
ever says, "Oh, that's really weird. You need to, do this sort of thing." Whereas you hear these stories in the United States all the time where they're saying, "Well, why aren't you dating? Why aren't you doing this?" And nobody, the few instances I'll talk to people, nobody cares. It's, do your own thing. I guess it's sort of
Mm.
this sort of German, just I'll mind my business, you mind yours kind of attitude. I don't know.
That too, but the other thing is Germans are, or the culture generally in Germany and most of the continent about men and women is quite unromantic and down to earth. People understand here, for instance, why you wouldn't really, force yourself into relationships or really, oh, I have to go to date. Now, they would understand why you're not interested. They would rather understand it than let's say in America, where everything is seems to be more extreme, overhyped, almost hysterical.
Yeah, it's almost
But
like an alternate reality.
yes, for instance, if you say, well, I'm just not interested in women in the romantic sense, then in Germany people would say, okay, he's not about romance, and yeah, that doesn't make him interested in women. I get it. So thank you very much for talking. And in America, it would be, oh, he's a misogynist. He hates women.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
People would interpret it this way.
people even agree with me when I just say, well, here are the reasons
Yeah,
why I don't want to, not interested in
yeah,
relationships. They take up time, they take up money. I'd rather spend my time, talking to you, for instance, or
yeah,
playing video games, or just thinking about stuff, just, not being under stress or pressure to have to do many things. And they think, oh, okay, that's a perspective. I mean, I might not personally relate to that, but it certainly makes sense. Whereas you
yeah.
try to explain that to anyone in the United States or Canada, and they just throw a shit fit. It's insane.
Yes, yeah. Like there's some sort of draft that you have to date
Yeah.
someone. No, I give you an anecdotal example. I was once in an electronics shop looking for a new tablet, and I was talking to an older guy who was standing around in the tablet department. And we just had a small chit chat about the tablets, and then we introduce ourselves, and then it turns out he was divorced, I was getting divorced at the time, and then was we were talking about divorce and how horrible divorce is, and how appalling marriage is, and then he was saying, yeah, I have custody of my 16-year-old son, and every time he comes to me and says, oh father, I fell in love with this and this girl, he said to me that he's telling his son, stop it with your stupid love, you are insane.
Yeah.
He was very staunchly anti-romantic and trying to to inoculate his son against this affliction, like love is insanity. Don't fall in love. Look what happened to me. I don't want you to get divorced as well. Something along these lines. It was very funny, and this man certainly has never listened to you or Barbarossa or any MGTOW channel, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and I think I suppose that that kind of attitude, cultural attitude, is one of the reasons why I personally feel I identify more with my European identity or side of things than the American. It's just more laid back, whether it comes
Yes.
to that issue or it's other issues. Did I leave people alone? They leave me alone. That's pretty much it. Um, for all the hype of sort of libertarianism and what have you, and in the United
Mm,
States, people don't really leave you alone. Everyone's a busybody.
mm,
Everyone is always asking you questions. I know this is perceived as sort of extra friendliness. Another great
I know.
example of this, a cultural difference, is when you're going to purchase something at a store. I mean,
Yes.
it's been years since I've lived in the United States, but I'll never forget this. It was maybe a decade ago where I had gone to the Gap and I wanted to buy a pair of jeans or two. And the
Mm,
saleswoman was just so abrasive. She's like, "Can I help you? Can I?" No, I don't need your help. I can find it myself. Thank you. But this is true everywhere you go. Whereas if I go to some place like Mediamarkt in Germany, if I
yes.
want help, I can get it. I can just go up and say, "I'm looking
Yes.
for a new MP3 player. What can you?"
Yes.
But no one is going to chase me down and just be up in
No.
my face about it. And that's just something that resonates far more with me, and why ultimately I prefer living in Europe. It's one of the major reasons compared to the
Mm,
United States is that there isn't that sort of fake friendliness. I know we're kind of sort of getting off topic, but I think it's related. The whole idea of kind of small talk and chit chat, sure, it exists, but
yes.
but not to that same degree. Nobody, how are you? I'm great. That kind of thing. It absolutely drives me
Yeah.
insane. I don't even know how to respond to that. I just prefer a very, guten tag, or hello,
Yeah.
and to move on. Um, this is another cultural thing that it seems to be very different from places like Canada and the United States, where there's a degree of superficial friendliness infused in the society and culture that I can't relate to.
I
That
would
mm,
I would even as far as go to say it's less of a no nonsense culture.
yeah,
Because if
yeah.
I'm asking you how you are, okay, then I have a general interest in how you really are.
Exactly. If somebody says, wie geht es dir?
Yes.
I mean, the implication is that they actually want to know how you're doing.
They actually,
Not-
they actually
whereas you,
want to really know. Yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
they have
whereas you
time
stand
to
in a
listen.
queue in a supermarket in the United
Yes.
States, like, how you doing? I actually pulled, I actually pulled off a trick once. I was having a terrible day, and somebody was at a supermarket asked me that, and I
Uh,
actually answered honestly. I said, "Well, actually, sir, I'm doing terribly. This happened in the morning, and that happened."
the
They don't
test came
expect
back
it.
positive.
Yeah, they don't expect it. But I think
Yeah.
it's just maybe this is all sort of culturally interwoven that somehow
Yeah.
in the United States this all sort of plays into this idea that has sort of led to these extreme polarities of feminism and
Yes.
uh, you quite literally are in theory in danger if you ride in a taxi cab with a woman. It's a risk in any major
Yes.
city in the United States or in Canada for that matter. Uh,
Yes.
you don't really see that here, and I think some of the things we've talked about are are part of the reasons,
Mm,
and it's one of the reasons why I just prefer living in Europe. I'm generally left alone. I leave people alone; they leave me alone. There are other problems in Europe. I've talked about mass immigration, uncontrolled immigration, but that kind of stuff is just nobody gives me weird issues about things. They don't think I'm. The few times I talk to them, they never think, "Oh, well, you need to get a girlfriend" or anything like that. It's just something that resonates far more with me than
but
the United States.
that's true. But as I said, everything in the United States is immediately hysterically or blown out of proportion.
Yeah,
For instance, and they are both parties at fault to a degree. Everything is just taken to the extreme, and I think also that the perspective many Americans have on what Europe is and what is happening in Europe, even with these refugees now coming here, is completely out of proportion. You see, basically everything is being strawmanned, and from both sides. You see, when the democratic left talks about Europe, they paint it as this completely
Utopian.
perfect,
Yeah.
utopian, problem-free, progressive society that has no issues anymore. And the right basically paints it as some form of, North Korea
Right.
with lots of Muslims who are riding in the streets every day. And in reality is it's not the first and not the latter.
Yeah.
It's
No.
there are some things, or let's say about the healthcare, when they always refer to European socialized healthcare, like there would be our hospitals would be death camps, and there's a shortage of medication, and our sick children have to sleep on the ground in German hospitals.
Well, that is that is the American way. Everything is polarized. I mean, when you think when you think of say German politics, you just don't see that degree of polarization. Even
No.
the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, the alternative for Germany,
Yes. Yeah.
they don't. I mean, they're quote unquote right wing, but they don't
Yes.
sound nearly as quote unquote right wing as some right wing American politicians.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
I think this is just a cultural legacy of the United States. It would probably take several weeks to discuss the evolution and history of that particular cultural legacy in the United States, but it certainly has been, I'd say, beneficial in insulating Germany and other European countries from the most extreme forms of modern feminism. But
Yes.
moving on to the topic of marriage and fathers' rights and divorce, to the extent you're willing to tell us about your experience, you were married, you
Yes.
procreated.
Yes.
The experience overall, my impression, has not been the most positive, despite the fact that Germany, compared to the United States, is not as extreme in these regards. Um,
Yes.
Tell us about your experience, basically.
Mm. I mean, first of all, you have to understand that Germany within Europe isn't even the most progressive country. Actually, Germany always is somewhere in the middle and trailing behind places like France and Benelux and Scandinavia. And my impression is that at the moment in Germany, there are lots of changes because I had very negative experiences and I had very positive experiences in Germany in the family courts. And
Can you
it,
give some
it, it
examples of that?
Yeah, for instance, I had an old bitter judge, old bitter woman, telling me that since I'm a man, what is my business in trying to be a father to an infant daughter? Okay, and I had other judges who were basically grilling my ex over false complaints and accusations, and basically telling her, if you don't sign this compromise, then there will be consequences.
No.
So basically, I've seen both extremes in the German court system. It depends a lot where you are, and if you are in a large city, and they're usually more egalitarian, more even pro father. If you are more in a rural place, then actually they tend to be more pro mother. There's even a split. I read a study that in the Protestant states of Germany, or states that are historically have more Protestant, inhabitants, more Protestant culture, actually the fathers win out more, and in the traditionally Catholic states, fathers lose out way more than in the Protestant states. So there are cultural differences within Germany, in the north and in the south, that also contribute to that. But Germany at the moment is in transition. I think we had in the past 15 years at least two major alimony reforms.
Hmm.
Yes,
What
they
exact? Can
have.
you tell us about that?
The first reform was actually under the Schroeder government in the early 2000s, where interestingly a coalition of democratic socialists and Green Party members were using to axe down alimony massively, and they have basically cancelled lifetime alimony. Basically, they have done away with it. There are only very, very few specific cases where lifetime alimony still has to be paid. Like if you divorce at 70 and you have been married for 40 years, then you have to still pay lifetime alimony in some cases. And but other than that, like in America, where you've been married for 3 years, she divorces you in some states, and then she's entitled to lifetime maintenance. That is not happening anymore here, and that's not happening anymore here for over 15 years almost. And the second alimony reform, interestingly, was under a liberal conservative government. When the German Libertarian Party and the German Conservative Party were forming the government in 2009. And it's very interesting what they said. The family minister basically came out to the press announcing the alimony reform, and she said, the days where you're once a doctor's wife and you always remain a doctor's wife, the days are over. So there was a very harsh appeal.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But
So I don't think this would be possible in America. A politician to
well,
come out and
no,
say,
there. I mean, you have to understand, of course, in the United States, the divorce industry is an industry. It's a business model, and so you know, it's worth off the top of my head, I believe tens of billions of dollars
yes.
every year. You're not going to get rid of that. It's so profitable to all the parties involved, except
Yeah, but
the
it's
men
profitable
usually.
also here. It's profitable also here. You have enough lawyers who buy who lease a new Porsche every 3 years while practicing divorce law. But still, the overall impression is in the political sphere that this has become toxic and it needs to be detoxed all the time. And this is not just restricted to Germany. We have seen even way more cutbacks in alimony in Scandinavia and Benelux and France. And in Switzerland, they had an interesting situation. They wanted, to reform the family law, and they were asking a senior professor of family law, which happened to be a woman, about her recommendations. And do you know what her first recommendation was?
No.
She said basically abolish state marriage.
Hmm.
Yeah. And of course, that was too radical. Then she had to come up with some more compromises and all that. But it is actually it is tolerable for the mainstream even to come up with relatively radical ideas. And this is maybe why MGTOW is for or the core of MGTOW, the core values of MGTOW for many Europeans are not that radical, because actually you could say, as your experience is, you can say this to normal people and they will say, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, I get it. Or even to a degree, yes, that's how I see it too. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, beyond that, your own personal experience was not entirely positive. Overall, it was more
No.
negative than positive.
Oh, put it this way, it cost me basically to get the justice. I had to wait for 3 years. There are many different factors contributing to this. One factor is that again there is no another change going on also about the custody. Custody is going to be made equally. The shared parenting is going sooner or later to be the law of the land, as it is in many European countries already. But the problem is you have to understand that the whole the whole judicature, all the judges. Everybody talks about the lawyers as a lobby, but the judges actually are a more effective lobby than the lawyers. Because the judges, there are many structural conservative judges. They're very reluctant, even if a new law is passed. If they are used to do something for 20 years, like giving women stuff and giving women children, even under more egalitarian laws, they will always try to find a way around it, more or less. Yeah. And I mean that the decision will be thrown out, on the circuit courts, but you know, at the but you will still have a first decision that's very bad, and then you will have to wait for maybe another year till that gets thrown out. That's the problem we have at the moment in Germany.
Yeah. Yeah. So, no, if you don't mind me asking for the audience, how did you find MGTOW and just how did you
Mm.
become aware of this stuff?
Well, basically, when my marriage broke apart, and I was going, basically, my first reaction was I was going on the internet to look for like-minded people, to look for people who have been going through the same through the same stuff. I didn't know what was coming. I had no idea really no idea what the laws were, what is going to happen. And then I was basically going on the internet, and then I saw, okay, I'm not the only one. There were, tons of forums about marriage and divorce, and and that this is not even a German problem, but this is, an international problem.
Yeah.
And somehow, clicking from here to there, then somebody mentioned the red pill, I remember. And then somehow I ended up, I think, with Karen Strawn. She mentioned MGTOW. And then I think I found Barbarossa or you even, uh, and started listening to this.
Yeah. 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 Well, it's, I mean, usually how it happens. It's kind of the marriage is shit and divorce is shittier experience is kind of a universal experience for men, I think.
It
Uh,
is.
so it only makes sense that people, men from all over the world, would come to the same realization.
Yes.
And I mean, you certainly would not endorse marriage, I would imagine.
No, I kind of, the problem is that many people say divorce is bad. No, I'm not saying divorce is great, okay? Um, Even in Germany, divorce is not really something comfortable. But the reality is that marriage actually already is something I cannot recommend, even if the marriage, quote unquote, would work out.
Yeah, I'm
It's
curious. I mean, I could suspect why you'd say that, but what are your reasons for saying that particular thing?
I mean, generally, it's a completely unnecessary, outdated lifestyle. You know, what it, what the reality of marriage is, it's boredom, it's isolation. You get isolated from friends and family
Yeah.
because basically you somehow still you live with that person under the roof for a very long time, and all the romance and all that is usually gone after some time. And a very few couples, I've yet to see one actually, very few couples live relatively problem free with each other. So basically you're living with a problem person, yeah, under one roof all the time. And the best moments are when your wife is sitting there with a laptop on one couch and you're sitting on the other couch with your tablet, and you, you interact as little as possible essentially,
Yeah.
because every interaction bears the seeds of conflict and nagging and discussion. So you rather, you know yeah, yeah,
Stay out
call
of
your
each
mother.
other's way, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Call your mother. Have you called your mother today? Something like that. You're actually happy when you are free and when you can maybe talk with friends or talk with family. The idea of married bliss actually is a complete delusion, and
Yeah.
it's not just my experience. From the few friends that actually got married that I have, all the marriages are dysfunctional. And by dysfunctional, I don't mean that they are boring, but I mean really dysfunctional. Like there's violence. One good friend is in a marriage where he's trapped. He has two children, and his wife is abusing him in front of the children. But he lives in I think in England, in India. He lives in London, and he says that he's afraid.
Hmm.
If he's leaving, he will never see his kids again. So he's enduring spousal abuse in front of his own children. Another one lives in Eastern Europe, and basically his wife is pushing him all the time to earn more money, and is putting him under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And as a result, he has gained massively weight. He has changed, isolated, has no time. We used to talk a lot. Now we don't. It's the same affliction. So I couldn't even give you one example where I'd say they have a good marriage. At least not when it comes to younger people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of course, these are things that everyone in the MGTOW audience kind of already knows, but yeah, it's not something that one could recommend anyone. Well, as
No.
you put it, even if it quote unquote works out, whatever that means, it almost
Yes.
certainly entails a lot of stress and
Yes.
a lot of insanity that I certainly would prefer not to deal with. I
Yes.
mean, the idea of waking up on, say, a Sunday, I went to bed really late last night, and then having
Mm-hmm.
someone nagging me, telling me what I have to do, and
Yes,
it's
right.
alien to me. And
Yeah,
I prefer it remain alien to me. So just
it's,
can't relate to that at all.
you do, you really prefer. You know, the reality is really horrible.
Yeah,
You can come home in the evenings, you're tired, then there's some discussion over some bullshit going on. When you have concerns like, is it really necessary to buy cosmetics for $200, something like that? You know, why would you do that? Why would you like to expose yourself to that? And anybody else who's giving you false promises that marriage is this New Jerusalem, something like that, is actively lying about the realities of marriage. And even those who tell you about the past, that in the past marriage did work out because there was no feminism, that's an absolute lie. Marriages didn't work out. They were as abusive and violent and exploitative as they are today. Only people didn't get divorced because it was hard to obtain a divorce. There was a huge social stigma. um, Maybe at the end of the day, some women did budge because they knew that without a husband, they will have to get some factory job they don't want to do, something like that. But don't think that in the past things were better. They weren't.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, the nagging, all it's always been the case with marriage. Not something anyone can really endorse. But I think that's been really insightful, particularly the differences between, I mean, cultural differences between Europe and the United States and Canada and the Anglosphere. Certainly, there's a lot of history behind that. But
Yeah.
at some point in time, I definitely would like to get Alexander here on again. We've had talked about last time we
Mm.
talked was like 3 in the morning. About I was half asleep, but a wide range of topics and incredibly knowledgeable about history and many other things related. So I'm hoping we can get you on again sometime. Is there anything that you'd like to add that you feel that we might have left out, or
At the moment, not maybe a short outlook to wrap this all up is basically that I think that despite all the ideological bubbles and all the extreme positions that maybe you might find in the Anglosphere, there's an objective reality. Even in America, there's an objective reality that you cannot deny. And I think the objective reality is that all the traditional forms, or traditional in quotation marks, forms of men and women relating to each other, they are becoming obsolete. And America will go down the same path as Europe at some point. And the only thing is that the question is how much a society, a culture, and even men themselves stand in their own way. That's the only problem essentially. But I don't think the future for America and Canada and Australia will be a completely that they will go in a completely different trajectory.
yeah,
I think there's just more friction that prevents them from taking off, and once they do, they will go down the same road essentially. So it's also important not only to focus on what feminists say and what Bible preachers say, but to really look at what are the underlying conditions and what is really happening in the political process.
yeah. Well, that was a nice wrap up. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope this was enjoyable. I hope next time you're standing in a queue in an American supermarket, no one asks you how you're doing, and if they do, tell them the truth. Anyway, thanks for being here, and we will talk to you in the not too distant future. Take care.
Take care. Thanks for having me.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.